G'day everyone, I am Kimo Sabi, I'm the man with the plan from the land down under, and I'm here doing another live review, this one of Saving the World issue 2, which is a fantastic cover by the ever controversial Sashi. Let's just appreciate this cover together. Fantastic work. Absolutely tip top. No Freudian slips there. I reviewed Saving the World #1 and gave it a generally favourable response. My primary criticisms were regarding that old adage, show don't tell. Tonic Mole was doing a lot of telling. He was telling us how people felt, he was telling us their motivations, telling us why they were doing what they were doing, when he seems to be perfectly capable of showing us those things and letting us make our own assessment. I don't know how much of Saving the World 2 he already had planned when he heard my review, and I don't know how much notice he took of it, and he's not obliged to. Nobody's obliged to listen to anything I have to say. I'd like to think I offer an individual or a unique perspective on comics, but I'm certainly no expert. I'm just a guy who's been reading comics a long time who'd like to make my own. And while I'm fairly opinionated, I try not to let my own biases get in the way of the art other people are creating, which is something that came up during the review of this book, because I found some things in here that fantastic cover, fantastic artwork. Once again, this is the sort of cover that if I saw this, simply just for the red hair and the boobs, I'd see this. I mean, who doesn't like freckly gingers with big boobs? You'd see this and pull it off the shelf, take it down off the shelf, have a flip through and see if it's something that's something for you. There's a lot of cheesecake elements in the book, but there's also pathos and realism and seriousness and real emotions. And the nudity isn't displayed in a gonzo, Penny Dreadful kind of way. It's more in a raw, vulnerable sort of way. And this is something I mentioned about the last book as well, that Kira's nudity is often portrayed as a moment of vulnerability, as opposed to, the Fantastic Four, second Fantastic Four movie, they're all swapping powers, and I think Sue ends up naked on the bridge because of invisibility powers run out, and she's there naked on the bridge and everybody can see her, and they treat it like a slapstick moment, because I think something like that's really disrespectful to the character, makes her seem foolish, makes her seem vulnerable, lets everybody see her in that vulnerable state. I don't find those sort of things funny, so when Kira's left in a state of nudity or semi-nudity, is portrayed in the book as a moment of vulnerability, not as a moment to laugh off or a moment to unzip your pants, which is something that I appreciate about the way Tonic Mole does stuff. So at the end of the last book, we're left with Kira meeting Nora. Kira's got super strength. When she manifests her super strength, when she uses her super strength, it manifests as a kind of hulking up effect. She gets very, very muscular and very vascular, puts on a lot of mass. Nora claims to have super intelligence, but we never really saw any evidence of that in the last book. They both arrive at a car crash hoping to help out. Kira manages to pull people out of the car crash just as the car explodes. She leaps away in a big Hulk leap as she leaps away from the explosion. And Nora tries to recruit Kira for the two of them to team up and, as the title of the book says, save the world. Tonic Mole's putting these books out really quickly. There's only a couple of months turnaround in between each one. He's nearly a one-man show. He writes and pencils and inks the whole thing himself, which is really impressive. And at the end of this book, he talks about how not only is issue 3 already in the works, but he's got 2 or 3 other projects that he's starting to develop. So written and illustrated by Tonic Mole. It doesn't say anything about an editor. I don't know if he gets beta readers. I don't know if he gets someone to edit his book for him. Donald DeLay put out a tweet about, it said artists write your own books. And I think I might have beat Doug Ernst to it. Doug Ernst's tweet probably got a lot more traction than mine, but mine said something to the effect of, yes, artists write your books, but also get lots of feedback, beta readers, and hire an editor that knows what they're doing. And Doug Ernst said something similar. Not saying an artist can't write their books, but it's unlikely that you can write as well as you can draw. I certainly can't draw as well as I can write. I can draw okay, but I can write really well. That's how I ended up edging over into writer territory. If you're an artist, you definitely want to be getting feedback on your books. You want to hire an editor. You want to hire somebody that can help you iron out any bugs you might have and create a really solid story. Most of the criticisms of Comicscape books and indie comic books tends to be the writing itself, not so much the art. And I think it gets overlooked because comics are a visual medium, so people say as long as the art's okay, it's fine. But that only lasts for so long. After a while, people stop buying in to a pretty looking book if the characters and the story aren't engaging. That's not a reflection on Saving the World. It's still a fun book. I'm just curious to see to what extent Tonic Mole receives feedback and direction from other creators, from editors and beta readers. A very, very complex opening image of these buildings here. It looks like it's been traced, but not a 3D model trace. It looks like a trace of a photo. Makes it look a little bit more organic than a 3D model. Little lone wolf shout out over there. I think Tonic Mole's fallen in with the Doug Garrett Gravestone Press group. I've talked to some of those guys and I've reviewed some of their books, and they seem like fairly straight shooters. I know Doug did distribution of Napalm Brothers for 6-Scale Combat, the first issue of Napalm Brothers, so it's good to see Tonic becoming part of a community, like the glow on the moon up there in the corner. So Nora's talking to Kira about her boobs. They spend two boobs, 4 in slip. They spend 2 pages talking about how big her boobs are and then how fat her ass is. And there's talk about objectification and how they shouldn't objectify themselves or each other. And then Nora's offended after Kira's offended. And then they end with a laugh. Once again, directing back to Kira's enormous breasts. I got to say that I got a bit of a chuckle out of this exchange. It's good to see them growing and becoming friends. I think it'd be kind of tricky to write a female relationship, like a burgeoning, developing female relationship. I don't know if that's something I'd be really super efficient at yet. I'm always impressed by people of the opposite sex, like a man that can write a woman well and a woman that can write a man well. I've heard all manner of advice about writing women as a bloke. Very little of it rang true. A lot of it seems almost tokenistic or even patronising. The idea that you write a male character and then just switch it to female, the idea that a woman can't be a competent character in her own right. She has to be ostensibly a man to get by. But then you put female features on a female and people call you out for that as well. So really, well, I was going to say it's walking on eggshells, or you're walking on a tightrope, or you could just say screw it and write what you write and let it find its own audience. There's always going to be some people that don't like what you do. There's always going to be people that don't like your stuff. If you try to appeal to everybody, you'll appeal to nobody. You're better off being your own thing and finding the niche audience that likes that sort of stuff. But there's also something to be said for selling to as wide an audience as possible. Why alienate people simply because you want to make a point? How important is that point? You want to make a point about something political, something racial, something sexual, and risk putting off readers when you could just omit that, tell a good story, and make your work available to as many people as possible? What's your measure of success? Is it to put forward a message and get a message across? Because the chances of you changing someone's mind with a comic narrative is pretty slim. So you're really just virtue signaling. You're just showing off, hey, look at me, this is what I believe. I don't need to know what you believe. I need to know if you can write me a good story. If you can write a story that I want to read, that I want to pay money for. So the measure of success, I think, is the number of sales. Does it appeal to a wide number of people, a large number of people? The girls are getting along, which is nice. It's not instant best friendsies that Zach's always talking about. And when Nora asks Kira about her boobs, you can see at the top there, zoom in, little anger lines like, oh, this makes me angry. I don't want to be talking about my boobs. Because she doesn't value them, she doesn't like them, she sees them as a nuisance. And having a chat, and then the police scanner says there's a job going on and that the suspect is considered armed and dangerous. And while Nora's all keen to jump in, Kira's a little bit more hesitant. I like the blurb up the top. Minutes later on a completely different rooftop. At first I thought this was kind of funny. She says, yikes, I guess the cops took care of that on their own. And her face shows that, she just saw something a bit frightening, a bit unpleasant. Those teeth are well drawn. Tonic's got some little bits and pieces. Like those teeth are just really well drawn. I like the way that he does her eyes. A bit like Deadpool or Spider-Man's eyes, how they've got character and they move. And then Nora's, critical of the police shooting him, and said that he drew his gun and the clip fell out. And Kira says that she hopes he actually deserved to be shot and not just some guy down on his luck, and blames herself, thinking if they were faster they could have saved him. And then they do that thing where they say, oh, well, the cop should have used a taser. So this is one of those things I'm talking about, where is Tonic's political leanings spilling into the story? Is he trying to make a point? And this is so topical right now. This is so... it has been for a while. Has been since before Rodney King. But this whole thing about cops, this whole thing about the use of lethal force, it's been an issue for a while. It's super topical and super relevant right now because of the stuff that's going on. Is this Tonic trying to make a point? Or is this him... is he using his characters as a mouthpiece? Or is he creating characters that think something contrary to what he thinks? Or is it just commentary about it in general and he's not taking sides? Sort of lampshades that says, oh, skinny dude like that, you think a taser would have been enough. We've all seen plenty of big lads tank out taser blasts over the last couple of weeks on social media. There's been quite a few big fellas that have been tased and managed to just shrug it off, so it's not a guaranteed thing. And who's to say they didn't try a taser before the girls got there? The guy's laying dead in the parking lot, and the police call it in. And I got a little bit confused by this point the first time round. So he's laying there with all the blood around him. He says it's time to make the world fear the name Roger. He wakes up and he stands up looking very menacing with the high contrast. As soon as he said Roger, he's got the dark hair and those features. I was immediately thinking of that, is it Roger Elliott? That guy that went nuts. Again, is this Tonic trying to make a point? Is he pointing towards these disenfranchised young men that are raised in a culture that tells them they're toxic from the minute they're born, and they end up becoming serial killers or mass shooters? Roger gets up and he starts using some pretty heavy supervillain type speech. Is that all you have, officers? Pity. It will take more than your measly bullets to stop me. Certainly putting on a show, very theatrical. Nora attributes it to him being on meth, but Kira doesn't look too convinced. And the officer says, officer under fire, send backup now. But at this point, it doesn't look like he's actually shot at them at all. I grow weary of this game. Make it easy on all of us and just die. So, nothing he says really hints towards his motivation. Like, why is he doing this? I think if we'd had some bullet holes in his chest up here, and I just think maybe he needed to be more obvious with the fact that he's got a healing factor, or that he can survive a huge amount of damage, because I wasn't sure. The first time I read it, I didn't look too closely, I didn't see the blood, and he just gets back up. I wasn't really sure what was happening. None of the officers are saying anything about, hey, we shot this guy and he's getting back up, what is this? I mean, this is a world where so far, as far as we can tell, there's no other superhumans, or there's not any known superhumans. This is only the third one we've seen in the entire story, aside from Nora and Kira. And they shoot him again, but, as a female officer, shoot him 3 times, once in the arm, once in the shoulder, and once in the lats. He doesn't, that's not necessarily enough to kill someone either. So I wasn't sure if this guy had a healing factor, or if he's just really lucky. And not that getting shot's lucky, but getting shot and not dying is kind of lucky. And he uses some sort of gas grenade, and he clearly states he's going to kill both the police officers. And then Kira does this thing where she comes in and has like a little speech, like a little monologue. It didn't work out so well for her last time. Last time she did that, she got sucker punched in the last book, and ended up on the ground getting by a whole group of guys. She would have been better off trying to take this guy by surprise, I think. Considering he's also got a gun, and she doesn't know if she's bulletproof or not yet. So she puts herself 10 feet away from this guy and calls him out and says, hey, we're going to stop you. He's just proven that he's at least semi-immortal, or he can survive a huge amount of damage, and he's got a gun. And he's not worried, he's not scared about killing people, because he just said he's going to commit a double homicide and kill these 2 cops. So this, Nora's got super intelligence, and her idea is just to walk within 10 feet of a guy with a gun and tell him that she's going to stop him. They at least recognise it's a really bad idea. And I can understand you're trying to build up that mentality, that narrative of they start out really raw and inexperienced, and they get better and better and better over time. This reminds me of the scene in the last book when Kira wakes up naked and time is dragged out. It feels like the short amount of time that she's running home, trying to cover up her nudity, is dragged out to a really long amount, and she's freaking out the whole time. And I said to Tonic, I said to anybody, I said in the review that you could have dropped a whole bunch of the narrative there, and just had it be almost a silent or a very minimal amount of text in the narration boxes, letting the pictures do the job here. And I think these top 3 panels is exactly the sort of thing I was talking about. Tick tock, tick tock. As the camera zooms in, you can see that her eye becomes the clock, and and then she tells heart, as my heart speeds up, time slows down. I can see the bullet. I can't move any faster than normal, just sooner. Which is a bit like that bit in Captain America. They said, Cap, how come you never get hit? Nobody ever shoots you. And he goes, I can see faster than you can. Like, he can see where the bad guys are going to shoot, and he makes sure he's not there. That's funny. I hope this doesn't look dumb in normal time, like I'm having the most convenient seizure ever. Tonic's a pretty funny guy. And then you see there when Kira punches him that she gets bigger and stronger, and it's tearing her costume again already. I think he's supposed to say, now prepare to meet your doom, but he's got the grenade pin in his mouth. She kicks it, goes far up and away, and they're too busy looking at that to realise that he's going to come up behind them with a gun. I suppose at some point Tonic had to show whether or not Kira is going to be bulletproof, because guns are the biggest impediment to street-level type heroes. Somebody like Batman or Daredevil, the chance of them not being killed, like you see in the animated series, Batman animated series, some thug will snap fire a Tommy gun at Batman and he jumps and dives and rolls out of the way. I mean, how many times could you really do that sort of thing before it doesn't work? How many times are you trying that thing and then somebody catches you mid-shot? You play the Batman games and they severely limit the number of guns and how quickly they can shoot and how often they can shoot, and the conditions to get them and use them against you as the player, specifically because guns are just so damn deadly. And I'm not the sort of person that worries too much about that Grant Morrison quote about who pumps up the tyres in the Batmobile and how does heat vision work. I don't worry too much about the sort of stuff. If it works, it works. And I'm happy for my characters not be shot. My favourite characters like Batman and Daredevil not to be shot. dead in the street. It's ignominious. It's low for them to die that way, and it's not a lot of fun, so I don't want to see that. But if your character's not bulletproof and you don't have a believable or a plot armor accepted way for them to get out of the way of bullets or avoid bullets, it's going to be really hard to make me believe. It's going to be really hard to make me believe they're going to survive on the street. I reviewed Englewood a couple of weeks ago, and within the first page, the gangsters are lampshading the fact they didn't have guns. They're all saying to each other, "Oh, gee, how come nobody brought a gun?" I said, "Oh, I was in a rush. I just grabbed whatever was nearby." Because as a street-level gangster and drug dealer, I don't have a gun nearby. I just picked up a lead pipe or a slat of wood or a knife or a chain. It's like, this is not the Warriors. Like, these guys have all got guns on hand. They've got ready access to guns. The gun problems come from illegal, unregistered guns in circulation, not all guns. These guys would have a gun. It doesn't make sense that they didn't, but you couldn't have 5 guys, 6 guys spill through a door on a rooftop with guns and shoot your street-level hand-to-hand character dead in the first couple of pages. So Roger Elliott shoots Kira in the head. I like how Tonic does these panels with no borders and with silhouette and that sort of stuff. He does a bit of that sort of stuff to keep it interesting, visually interesting, so it's not just panel after panel after panel. She is, of course, bulletproof, thankfully. And then, now I know that the guy's, he just tried to shoot her, and he's ostensibly immortal, but she picks him up and she does that thing that Hulk does in the Avengers and tell Loki. Everybody laughed at it, and I thought that's sort of like it devalues Loki. It makes him less of a threat. It makes him comedic. And I think really from that minute on, from the moment that he got slammed around by the Hulk, he became a joke for the whole rest of the series, the rest of every MCU movie. Between that and him getting outwitted, out emotionally witted, getting punked by Black Widow. I mean, here's Loki, the Norse god of trickery, of mischief, getting emotionally manipulated by a 34-year-old woman, mortal woman. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So she beats him like a drum, beats him like it's her job, beats him like a red-headed stepchild, throws him, I don't know, I thought it was over the water, but there's no water nearby, and she's obviously not near water in the next panel. And he keeps making fun of her because of the size of her breasts, like that's her defining characteristic. I mean, I suppose she could get a costume that covers it up, but she's chosen not to. He says, "Don't you get it? You can't kill me." She says, "Yeah, but it's fun to try." And then she just fly swats him with a police car, which I thought, what if this guy's like, you know, like early Wolverine, before the adamantium and before all those powers are established. You look at the old X-Men cartoon, Sabretooth slashes him in the side, and Wolverine's out of commission for a week. I mean, most of us would have been killed by it or would have been out of commission for months. He recovers in a week, like he says he heals fast. But what if this guy can just take a certain amount of damage? What if he's got a certain amount of damage at a time? Or what if he can only take only low-level damage? Or is like a Highlander or a zombie. You destroy the head, you destroy the brain, and he dies. By hitting him with a car, she might have murdered this guy. And yeah, he was shooting people, shooting at people, and he was trying to kill the cops, and the cops are shooting back at him. But it just seems like a real jump from trying to stop a wife beating in the last issue to crushing a man alive with a Hulk police car. It's pretty bloodthirsty, and again, it makes me wonder if my theories about how this book's going to go on, about how the characters are going to change over time and maybe even come to be at odds with one another, if those sort of things are going to play out the way I thought they might. Nora says, "You saw me dodging bullets and you just had to one-up me." So they're both very impressive. She's bulletproof. He's a complete mess. His arm looks like his arm's been broken off, and he's got a pipe bomb. She catches a pipe bomb. She doesn't have time to throw it. She's too busy telling Nora to get back. I suppose she could have done the Captain America thing and hugged it to herself and taken the blast. It goes off in her hand. It destroys her costume, but she is literally unharmed. And she doesn't seem to hulk up when she takes damage. She only seems to hulk up when she uses her strength. It'll be interesting to see what sort of relationship her strength and invulnerability have with each other, because you can't have super strength without some level of invulnerability. Spider-Man should really at least be, I think, knife-proof, small caliber gun-proof. If his muscles and tendons and skin and bones are strong enough to support 10 tons, you look at the Marvel Handbook, he can pick up 10 tons. He can pick up a car or a tank above his head. If he can support that, then his muscles and tendons have to be strong enough to withstand, say, a blade. His muscle and tissue and fibre have to be dense enough to withstand that level of trauma. And the fact that a regular bloke can come up and just cut Spider-Man, it's probably still a bit of an oversight that they wouldn't have thought about powers as extensively back in Stan's day as they probably do now. The destroyed costume is a little bit more fan servicey, but I'm certainly not complaining. He got away and left his arm behind. So it saved the cops, but there's no sight of the cops. I don't know if they ran away or if they're unconscious somewhere from the gas. They get the guy's backpack and they realise they better get out of there before police turn up. And they're going to use the backpack to try and track this guy down. And this is where Nora comes into play, using her intelligence to find the guy, to track him down with computers, and they come up with a plan. And this is something that I was hoping to see more of in the book. If you've got people who, I think it's very realistic. You've got a couple of people that are suddenly blessed with superpowers. There's no handbook for this sort of thing. There's no standard way of doing it. You've just got to decide. You've got to come up with plans on the fly. Like, how do you deal with this guy? Here's a guy that cannot be killed. He's lost an arm. He's been shot. He's been crushed under a police car, and he's managed to come back He's managed to survive. I don't know if he heals it or if he resets to the previous state. I don't know if it's like a Wolverine thing where he grows it all back, or whether he just sort of reforms in the shape that he had earlier. If he's like a stress ball, and as you release, as he heals, he fills back out and replaces and repairs the parts that were damaged. So they talk about disarming him, but they don't think he's strong enough to break out of handcuffs or to even tear off his own hands to escape handcuffs and regrow them. Kira's worried about going into the guy's house blind, not knowing what they're heading in for. So Nora says that she'll hack every device to see what they're going into, so they're not going in blind. They're going to empty his bank account and delete all of his save games off his computer, anything else to mess with him. And at this point, they're chasing this guy. He's not very supervillain. He's a guy in a black turtleneck who wanted to kill cops for no reason. He said, "You can't push me around anymore. You're going to learn to fear the name Roger." I feel like there's an opportunity here to maybe delve into the sort of things that happens to someone to turn them into the type of person that takes their frustration out in a form of violence, that just wants to kill to regain the power they feel like they've lost. How did Roger become this sort of thing? Don't just make it like a dunk on incels, because that's propaganda. Talk about the very real disconnect that especially young males have from society when they're told they're toxic, and then when they're pushed out of spaces, and without the right support, without the right family structure, without kind words, they fall into these types of mentalities where they will get a gun, and when they will go and shoot people. They will go and hurt the world they feel like has hurt them. It's a real issue, and it's something that could be talked about here without being flippant about it. They go to Roger's house, and he lives with his mum. The girls are undercover as Thots. Mum lets him in and says Roger's down in the basement. I think Tonic does a good job of making people look different from one another. Even without colour, they're all very clearly different people. And he's got some really great expressive faces. If you look at Nora in this panel here, he is, I think it's very expressive, very realistic. And Kira's is more of a, well, I don't like this plan, but I'm going along with it because I'm here, aren't I? And of course the mum's racist. Is that necessary? Is it necessary to have the mum be racist? Is that his commentary on how people end up being Elliot Rodger type individuals? You have racist parents, and because you've got parents that don't have views that line up with the mainstream media, you're destined to become an incel mass shooter. Kira once again says that she doesn't think this is an especially good plan, and Roger is extremely nonplussed by them finding him, and he says, well, what are you going to do? What can you do to me? What do you hope to accomplish? So far there's no amount of damage he's taken that can stop him and slow him down. But the girls say they're here to offer a truce, and that maybe they could actually join forces rather than fight one another, because they're all outcasts, they're all alienated, and the alienation was because they were seen as different, but now different is good because different is powerful. Their powers make them different, so they could be united in that way. And Roger's not having any of it. He continues to point out that Kira's got big boobs, just body shaming. He says that his house is rigged with enough C4 to level a city block. Nora tells him she hacked everything, and if he goes for the gun under his table, they've used cameras in the house to realise that he's got a gun under the table. If he goes for them, they're going to post every nasty thing that he's got on his hard drive. They've locked him out of his own computer. And then this is pretty clever. I want to see more of this sort of thing. He said, you can't hurt me, you can't stop me, you can break me, shoot me, punch me, whatever, it doesn't slow me down. I'm invincible. She goes, yeah, but what about Mace? He can withstand blunt force trauma, but getting hit by a car or punched or shot, but a chemical agent has a continuous effect, so it'll continually burn him in his eyes and make him less effective, take him out of the fight. The police turn up, and they say it's time to set the scene. They handcuff him and yank his pants down to make him look like a sexual predator. So when the police move in, he's the one that looks like a bad guy, and he gets arrested, and they look like a couple of innocent girls that have been lured there with promises of root beer, which in the Me Too era is a pretty clever and convenient way to get rid of someone. You want to make a bloke seem worse than Hitler, all you got to do is make an accusation. It doesn't even have to be true. This is some meta commentary, almost like pointing out how the Me Too movement can be a bludgeon, a cudgel, a weapon They can be used to beat anybody you disagree with. I mean, just the last couple of days, Twitter's been blowing up with all these people talking about comic professionals that have harassed and sexually harassed people and targeted women in particular, male comic professionals that have targeted female fans and professionals and up-and-coming professionals. It's been a big deal, and despite a few people calling for innocent until proven guilty, it's just not happening. People are being tarred and feathered over this without any due process. All it takes is a few people saying, or even one person saying, this guy did this to me, and that's the end of their career. I mean, they're going after big names like Warren Ellis. Admittedly, I think Ellis has something like 20 women levelling Twitter charges against him, but I mean, where are they going to the police? Where's the line in harassment? And they hit him with pepper spray and they tase him, which goes along with which supports the previous principle that Nora was talking about. He might be invincible. He might be able to grow back from any amount of damage, but will constant electric shocks that cause his muscles to seize up keep him incapacitated. It might not do permanent damage, but it might force his body to seize up, and then he won't be able to do anything. And now they're aware that there's more people out there with powers. They say they should probably learn to fight and I say they should learn to fight. They don't say this, but I think the implication there is they've got to get organised. This is a fly by the seat of the pants thing. Thanks to the wonders of Me Too, they were able to have Roger Elliott sent to prison, but there's no guarantee. I mean, he might get community service. He might get let off with a slap on the wrist, and then he's back to doing whatever he does. Now he's seen their faces. Now he's aware they exist. He's got some idea about the limits of their powers, what they can and can't do. He'll come back better prepared. He'll come back probably in an outfit of his own. He might come back having gathered more superpowered people. They've really just put a band-aid over this thing. They've really just postponed it. And the backup story is exceptionally well drawn, and it's got both the characters there taking martial arts classes. There's also a backup story of Lily and Wet. Sorry, Tonic, if I said that wrong. This is a continuation of the extra comic that was offered as part of the first campaign. So he's doing this thing where he's running a couple of simultaneous stories together. So the first book was 34 pages. So if you take away the cover and the intro, you're looking at 30 to 32 pages, which is good. That's better than your standard comic. It's better than a Marvel or DC book. And then you get this one page back up, and then you get another 6 or 8 pages or so. Which I won't review this one, I'll just leave that. Tonic sure does have a type. There and there. I'd like to cut your jib. On this page, Tonic's talking about some of the upcoming projects he's got going on. One called Sober, which is a 60s zombie apocalypse story, which it's got me interested. I mean, zombie apocalypse stories have been done, but setting it in the 60s gives me a feeling of Night of the Dead and the original Dawn of the Dead in the shopping mall. I think by setting it in an earlier era, you generate a little bit more interest. It's not just another zombie story. Now that Walking Dead's pretty much done everything that can be done, if you set it back in the 60s, you're at least going to have some different obstacles, some different technologies, some different attitudes, a chance to tell a story. And here's one. If the zombie apocalypse had happened in the 60s, what would it look like now in 2020? I mean, that's another 60-year gap. In the subsequent 60 years from that initial outbreak in the 60s, what would our world look like now? Would we be all dead? Would we be pushed into little cities and barely surviving? Will we have overcome the zombie virus somehow and domesticated them or wiped them out? Would the zombie virus be seen as something like COVID is now, where people keep a watch on it, and when there's an outbreak or a spike, take appropriate measures for a certain amount of time until that spike subsides and they go back to business as usual? He says that Lily and Wet are a major part of the overall storyline in saving the world, so they'll be around more often. And there's also a story called Crud, which is about another feisty redhead, a barbarian lady who fights her way through a mysterious world of high fantasy. So he's got a lot in the pipeline, which is good to see. There's definitely a lot more show not tell in this book. I think it's an improvement over the last one. There is 0 narrator boxes that I can see. Okay, 1. So there's minimal narrator boxes. I think you probably could have dropped these narration boxes, but they don't hurt being here. I'm a fan of minimal narration, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have any. And you definitely should have some when you're setting the scene to aid with your transitions. I think this is the right sort of narration. As my heart speeds up, time slows down. I can see the bullet. I can't move any faster than normal, just sooner. Gives us an idea about how her powers work. She doesn't have super speed, but she's so intelligent. She's so aware of things. Her brain operates at such a higher level that she can see the trajectory of the bullet. She can see where it's going to end up. And it gives her the opportunity to move ahead of where it's going to be. I think probably what it would have been better is if from his... There's a scene in the animated Street Fighter cartoon where Ryu learns to predict where bullets are going to... where punches are going to be. He can see every punch that's coming at him, every potential punch that's coming at him. By studying his opponent's fighting style, he's able to narrow down exactly where the attack's going to come from so he can block or avoid every punch and every kick. Something like that probably would have been an even better way to illustrate this. Time slows down and she realizes, mathematically by the angle, she can see where this bullet is going to end up, where he's going to shoot, where the next shot is going to be, where the kick of the gun is going to take the next bullet. And so sooner than he can aim at her, she's ahead of where the bullets are going to be, so he can't ever hit her. She doesn't have super speed, but she's able to constantly be ahead of his reactions by predicting where he's going to be. I think this guy needs a little bit more exploration as to who he is and why he does what he does. The implication is that he's got a bunch of horrible porn on his computer. He looks like Elliot Rodger. He just wants to kill people for the sake of killing people. It seems a little bit flat. It does seem like a poke at the whole incel mass shooter stereotype. Tonic has done a nice little bit of world building here, letting us know that other super powered people do exist. He's shown a bit of progress with the girls. They've come together as a team, found their niches, haven't had any major blow-ups or personality conflicts yet. They've recognised their strengths and realised what their weaknesses are and the areas they've got to overcome. And certainly by participating in some sort of combat training, maybe setting up some sort of watchtower, Overwatch type computer system to collate data and coordinate their efforts, is going to turn them into a more efficient crime fighting team. Roger did challenge them and said, what do you really think you're going to change by wearing costumes and capes and fighting crime? And there's a point there. At what point does a superhero just act as a band-aid for bigger societal problems? I really hope that Tonic is pushing in the direction that I theorized earlier, that he is pushing it into a sort of how can these guys affect society, change society to suit their own vision with the powers they've got. Superman's able to act as a symbol of hope, but that's because he is nearly omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. He's able to be nearly everywhere. He's able to deal with almost every problem, and he's unendingly right, unendingly upstanding and honourable. It's difficult for other heroes to be able to do that sort of thing. These characters aren't necessarily going to be acting as a beacon of hope that's going to unify mankind, but do they have bigger plans? Do they have a bigger destiny that causes them to change the world beyond just fighting crime in a cape and a mask? All in all, a step up from the previous issue. I will be back for issue 3. I'll continue to support this book. I'm really interested to see where the story is going to go. I do enjoy Tonic's cartoony style, the quirky offbeat humour, the very distinct personalities of the two protagonists. Interesting that Nora hasn't checked in with her boyfriend after she disappeared. As far as we know, is he still at home waiting for her, or has super intelligence to cause her to abandon him altogether? The quick turnaround time on Saving the World 2. With a quick turnaround time on Saving the World 2 following number 1 and issue 3 already being worked on, I have no doubt we'll be seeing the third issue very soon. This is another win for Tonic. Fun read, with quirky characters and action. I guess I'd have to hear from the creator himself whether he intended it to be as political, as much of a commentary on political issues as I thought it might have been. I might just be reading into it. I've said in other videos, I guess the point we become so hyper aware of political issues because they're pushed so constantly, you can't not see them anymore. People have been made hyper aware of them. And it does take some of the fun out of engaging with media. If you're watching a movie or reading a book or reading a comic and then something political comes up and it feels shoehorned and it's got links and clear parallels to something else, and literature's supposed to do that. You're supposed to be able to have links to real-world events or to other themes, and it's a visual shorthand. If I have a tall, strong, unmasked superhero with a cape and undies on the outside that flies and is really strong, it doesn't matter what I call him, it doesn't matter what he does, I'm able to evoke strains of Superman just from that visual. If I have a guy that operates at night and is all dark and gloomy, is grim and gritty and likes to break people's arms, I'm able to evoke Batman. And all the history is cheating. All the history that Batman has, I'm able to evoke that. If I have a Dark Knight vigilante from rooftop to rooftop, fighting criminals, using tether lines and some variation of Batarang, some gadgets, it's clearly a Batman parallel. I'm able to access all the feelings you have about Batman and lump them all onto this proxy character. That's one of the advantages of literacy, one of the advantages of visual literacy, like in comics. However, the inverse is also true. That guy looked a lot like Elliot Rodger. As soon as I saw him, there's this dark-haired guy with a gun attacking two lone police officers in the middle of the night, not an especially well thought out plan. My first thought was, is this an Elliot Rodger analogue? Is this an Elliot Rodger XP? Is Tonic Mole trying to make a point here? Is that the sort of thing as a writer you need to be aware of? If you're drawing a character and it has a visual similarity to someone else, do you need to think, hold on, do you need to be aware of it enough? Maybe, what if Tonic Mole's never heard of Elliot Rodger? What if he doesn't know who that guy is and the horrible things he did and the motivation for doing it? Then I'm tarring him with a brush. I'm saying he's making a statement or is not making a statement one way or the other, and he could be completely innocent. He could have no idea about those events that transpired. It's a brave thing to create something and put it out there, knowing that people are going to react to it, that people are going to criticise it and like it and dislike it and draw parallels and put words into your mouth. I'd like to think Tonic is just trying to create a fun book, a fun story, and he's succeeded in that. But maybe we've entered a time where, because everything's been made political, everything has to be political whether you want it to be or not. And if that's the case, I think I'm going to have to mourn the loss of a time when we could just read a story for the sake of enjoying the story and the art and the characters,